In this lesson, we're going to look at if statements. Now, if statements are crazy powerful and they allow you to take data and compare it, and based on that comparison, allow you to churn out other bits of information. So, we're just going to look at this briefly, and then I'm going to give you a challenge too. So, the first thing, what is a data? So, as said previously, it's about comparing data and then giving you the opportunity based on that comparison to actually output something or do something else and make it kind of generate other stuff. So the next thing you're going to want to know is, why does Python need to be indented? So when we start looking at if statements and loops, you're going to start noting that most things start to get indented. Now this is because Python doesn't use braces, it doesn't use brackets to kind of specify that something belongs to something else, okay? Instead it uses indents, and this kind of says, right, this is part of the hierarchy, or this belongs to this particular part of code. So in this lesson, we're going to be looking at if statements, if else statements, if ELIF, and else statements. Okay, so 3 kinds of statements that you're going to want to look at. And then finally, the challenge that I'm going to give you guys is to create a simple quiz, 10 questions long, that gives a user points and then generates their answers and how many points they got at the end. So let's go and have a look. So what I've done in advance is I've created an if statements Python file. I've put this in my Python basics folder. So once you've done that, we can start to code. Now, what I tend to do first is put all of the variables in place. So anything that I want to compare goes first. So let's just carry on down the route of having name as a variable. And remember, you can have any kind of variable. You're not fixed to just name, or you can call it whatever you want. Just because I'm using it this way, you'll find lots of ways of writing variables. And that's another thing, is because I've done a variable in a certain way, you will inevitably find a different way of doing it. There doesn't tend to be one singular answer. What we tend to look for is simplicity in our code and efficiency. So making sure it's simple to understand and making sure it's efficient to use. So we've got name, and then we're going to have an input function. So we're just going to say input, and then we know it's a function because it's got these brackets, and then we say, what's your name? So now we've got this, let's create one more variable. Once again, you can have as many variables as you want, and when you come to creating your quiz, you'll probably want a whole bunch of them. So let's just say points, and we're going to initialize the points at 0. So now we have all our variables set up, we can start creating our if statement. So the if statement just starts and is the word if. Now in most other languages, you will find that there's all these kind of long and complicated ways of doing these sorts of things, but Python makes this so simple. So if name, I've done it again, if name, and then we need a comparison. So name is obviously pulling from this function, and then we need a comparison. So last lesson we looked at these comparison operators. So we had greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, not equal to, and a whole bunch of others. But the one that I like to use quite a bit is the equal to. And just remember that that is 2 equal signs. So for this, I'm just going to say Mr. C. So, and then you do need a colon at the end. So in terms of Python, that's how you write an if statement. It's very simple. So you say if something is compared to something else. So if name, which is our variable, is equal to, so as long as the input has the word Mr. C in it, it will chuck out some data. So what data do we want it to chuck out? And once again, you can have, this can be as complex as you want, but I'm just going to say, hi Mr. C. Okay, keep it nice and simple, but you can say all kinds of stuff. It doesn't have to be that simple, or you can have multiple print statements, or you can have other comparisons based on top of that. So if I was to run this now, and this is our if statement, as you can see, our if statement is just 2 lines, simpler than any other language. Okay, so just 2 lines of code. So let's run this, and let's say, what's my name equal to, and I'm going to say John, and it goes, what? Nothing. And it's because if you look at the code, it basically, if it's not equal to Mr. Cameron, it won't do anything. It literally will shut down on you because there's nothing that comes after it. So it's just going to say it will shut down on you. So let's just run that again. And this time let's put the correct answer in. So let's say Mr. C, and it does matter if it's capitalized in this instance. I'll show you later on how to kind of make it so it doesn't matter if there's capitals and it doesn't matter if there's spaces, but at the moment we do need to make sure that it's spelled right. So press enter and it says hi Mr. C. So because what I typed was equal to this, it's allowing it to come in this indent and actually print out hi Mr. C. Now that's an important thing that I missed before, is the indent is one tab or it's 4 space bars. Okay, for simplicity I tend to just use the tab because it's easier, and if you mess up the space bars it kind of gets a bit crazy, and especially when you start nesting statements as well, so the indenting starts to kind of go a bit crazy after that. But the reason it's indented is because it's saying, look, if this happens, do this. And the only way that Python knows that this belongs to this is because it's indented. For instance, if I unindented it and run the code, it would just run the code straight off, or it would crash out on me because it wanted the actual an answer. But if it hadn't have crashed on me, it would have just said basically, you need to, hi Mr. Cameron. Whatever I put up here, it would just said hi Mr. Cameron. So the indent basically makes it so that it belongs to it. Okay. So we have our first if statement. Now, how do we stop it from crashing? How do we stop it so that if I type John, it does something based on that comparison? And that's called the else. And you'll notice that the else statement doesn't take an argument. So this is an argument here, okay? Or this is a comparison, whatever you want to call it. But it doesn't take it. An else statement will basically just say, if this doesn't happen, do this. Okay, and look at the colon at the end. So let's print out this, and let's just say I'm not sure about that name, and let's try spelling what right as well. There we go. So just basically it says I'm not sure about that name. Make sure we've got speech marks around for the string, and this should work. So when I press John, or say whatever I want, Peter or whatever, and it'll say I'm not sure about that name. So what it's telling Python is that if this statement isn't true, if this statement doesn't run, do this statement. So there are lots of different names out there, not just John and Peter and that. So what we might now need is an ELIF statement. An ELIF does need an argument. So we can write the argument name again, and we can say equal to, but this time we want John. Okay. Don't forget your colon, otherwise it won't do the indent for you. And let's print hi John. Okay, so now when I type John, it will do this. If I don't type Mr. C or John, it will still do this. So let's do Peter again, or let's do John. Which one should we do? Let's do John first, just to see if it works. So John, let's just say hi John. Okay, and then let's run it one more time with Peter. And you see I'm not sure about that name. Okay, so the good thing is you can have multiple ELIF statements. So let's just copy that again, and this time let's say Peter, and let's change this to hi Peter. Okay, and it's nested at the moment, it's indented, so we need to take that indent off, otherwise it won't read it the same way, because a nested if statement kind of goes like that, and it says, right, if this is true, then you can do this, and that would have been an if statement if it was nested. But we will come on to nested if statements, and I'll show you how to do them, but let's just keep it really simple at the moment. So now we have something for Mr. Cameron, Peter, John, Peter, and then I'm not sure, which will always execute if you write something like Claire. So there is the bulk of how an if statement works, and you saw that there was 3 ways of doing that. So you can have an if statement on its own, you can have an if and an else statement, or you can have an if and an ELIF and an else statement. And you can have as many ELIFs as you want, so you're not limited. So because there's about 1 million names out there, and if you wanted a variation for every single name, you could do this a whole bunch of times, couldn't you? Okay, and that's what you need to know, is actual fact you can have as many ELIFs as you want. Okay, and that from if all the way to else is one else statement. You can also have multiple if statements, and this is what you're going to need when you get to doing your quiz in just a moment. So let me just rub out some of this stuff now, and let's just make it a bit more simpler. And for now, I'm just going to get rid of the ELIFs because I'm not going to need that for my quiz. Okay. So we can input the name, and that's absolutely fine. So let's have another one, and let's do this time question. Something like question 1. We could have okay, so we're just going to put up our question here. This is going to be useful a bit later. In actual fact, let's get rid of that. Let's do it a different way. Let's have it as an input. So it asks us this set first, and then it's going to ask us this set. So let's say question 1 equals input. So we're going to let the user input it rather than have a static answer. We know what the static answer would be, but rather than have a static answer, we're going to let the user say it. So we're going to say, what is the capital of England? Okay. If question 1 is equal to London, print that's correct. Else, sorry, that's wrong. Okay, so now we have our first question, and you can carry on. There are multiple ways of doing this, so you need to know that actually fact this is the way I'm doing it. But for your 10 question quiz, you can do it a different way if you find a better way of doing this. But we've got our question 1, and then we've got our input. Now we've also got our points as well. So what you can also do is you can come down here and say points is equal to, and we can accumulate the points. So because this is correct, we obviously want to give it a number of points. So in this case, I want to give them 10 points for a correct answer. So we now need to call up points. Now the reason we say points is assigned to points is because we need this number here first. And then we say plus 10. Okay? So now, because they got this right, this whole statement is going to run, so it's going to say that's correct. And in the background, it's going to give them 10 points. Now at the end of our quiz, we can say print well done name, you scored points. Something like that. Well done, Mr. Cameron, you scored 10 points. Okay, because this is points, I had to write this points at the end because all that's going to do is give me a number. So if you had multiple questions, you could obviously accumulate this. But let's just see if that works. So run. So first thing, Mr. C. Hi, Mr. C. What is the capital of England? I'm going to say London. And says that's correct, but my 10 points hasn't worked. Points is not defined, so I've spelled point. So that's where you got to be very careful. So it realizes point and point are 2 different things, and it's good to make those errors so you can actually see it running for itself. So let's run that again. Hopefully this time it will do exactly what it's meant to do. There we go. So well done, Mr. C. You scored 10 points. And if you had multiple questions, you could keep adding this up to it. So you could always say, right, grab the points again, and then add another 10 points to it. You know, and you don't need to put it in for the else, because obviously, unless you want minus numbers, let's do that. If they get it wrong, that's a good idea. If they get it wrong, let's take it away. So rather than saying plus, we say minus. So you can actually, if they get it wrong, you can actually take a point away from them, which is great. Or you can have ELIF. So if they get it partially right, so if it's like, you know, there could have been 2 or 3 different answers, you could give them a set number of points for each variation if you want. So the main answer gets 10. If they do an ELIF, it gets 5, and so on, until the else, when they just get 0 or minus points. So I hope that was useful. Now your mission is to create a simple 10-question quiz on whatever subjects you want. So just question and answers, nothing too complex at this point. Give the user points at the end of it. Give them a nice message. So I've done a very simple message here, but you could go so much further with your message, just like we've done in previous lessons. So give that a shot, and I'll see you in the next lesson.